Hey, you guys, this is Dr. Cunningham with Life Lessons. And today I actually have a parent and teen seminar scheduled. So I decided to pre record and to post to share. It's going to be just foundational and introductory information. I am dressed more sporty today because when I'm working with families, I actually prefer to be active. And so, especially when working with teens and families, because I find in my experience as a clinician that experiential exercises help with regards to learning new patterns, new techniques, new ways of interacting within a relationship. And so I decided that I would sort of express a combination of my clinical skill sets and my experience over 20 years, along with my thespian experience, or experience even just as a sporty person, creative, if one would say. I am not acting as far as me being a therapist. I definitely went to school. I attended undergrad at Trinity College in psychology. In Trinity College, located in Hartford. I attended Central Connecticut State University, where I received my master's in marriage and family therapy. And then I obtained my doctorate in marriage and family therapy from Antioch University, New England. I do have experience with psychodrama where I've traveled with groups where we would implement certain scenes or situations and scenarios. And then the audience, usually at large seminars and facilities, where individuals or groups of people would be able to brainstorm solutions that would help them practically to think about how to make sound judgment calls in their everyday life. And so I've done a lot of work with teens, teenagers, parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles. I like working with families, and I especially enjoy working with multiple generations. And I like focusing on ways of enhancing relationships. Why did I choose this particular topic? Is because transitional phases and stages are quite tough for people in general. And I am a coach that focuses on major life changes and transitions. And so going from adolescence into young adulthood is a tough transitional phase and stage. That's the age and the stage where a lot of experiencing life and experimentation happens. And so, because of that, that can also lead to a situation where relationships can be estranged at times between parents and teens, or parents and adolescents, or even late adolescents. So, because of that, I determined it would be a great idea to have a discussion with parents and teens in order to either focus on preparation for those particular phases, that particular phase and stage, or to work through what may be currently occurring within that particular phase and stage. There is research that shows that 60% of youth and parents do have positive relationships. So I'm not saying that there aren't relationships that aren't positive. At the same time, there's can always be room for improvement. And if parents are concerned about not knowing what is going on in their child's or their adolescent's life because of communication not happening like it once did during their child years and their youth years, then hopefully this is a seminar or a tape that one can watch or video that one can watch and notice the benefits of how to enhance a relationship in small, nuanced ways. At the same time, what I will say is that it's helpful during those particular phases and stages is to be aware of who your adolescent or almost young adult is spending time with, because it is helpful not only to maintain a barometer regarding their life, at the same time to have a sense of who you can connect with in order to remain connected to them. Because it is important for adolescents and young adults to know what it is to branch beyond themselves, to make connections, to create relationships. that can help to enhance their lives even further. Because at that point, once they are an adolescent, a late adolescence, young adulthood, they're beyond parenting. At that point, it's more like how can you they have coaches in their life, mentors, life coaches that will help them to continue to move forward and provide support with regards to their goals, establishing their goals, their life mission, their purpose, their vision within their life. And so it's important to know who your adolescent is connected to. Not necessarily saying for you to be a helicopter parent and for you to know every detail of everything that's happening, because the flip side of the research does show that about 91% of adolescents really aren't honest with their parents about what they're doing, which is the reason why I always say when working with and teaching your children, it's important to instill principles and values within them, such as like character and integrity, such as kindness, and even to teach them the skill sets of what it means to communicate effectively, as well as to be able to manage their own emotions, so that they are aware of not only how to express themselves with the appropriate language, but then also how to be able to manage when they do feel negative emotions, because that helps us even through adulthood. Because children are just uh, youth, or essentially we looking at, from my perspective, a child is essentially an adult that's going through the process of development to reach that point of adulthood in order for them to contribute to the community and society a positive impact, right? And so parenting is a very tough position. I think it's one of the greatest jobs that one can have, because you can potentially have such a great impact on society through the little people that you create into great adults. And so, this is not a seminar that's or information that's going to focus specifically on particular values or principles per se, because from my perspective, once a youth is an adolescent and going into young adulthood, that those particular values and principles should already foundationally be a part of who they are, and that you're just building upon it. So I would focus on, again, little ones, like, for example, even what it means to save, or what it means, meaning save, meaning saving their money, how they spend their finances, and also even when it, with regards to relationship, being honest, what it means to not tell a lie, and also even how discipline occurs with regards to honesty, because I could tell you stories for days, but there are times where it's like, I'd rather you just tell me the truth. But if they tell you the truth, and then you turn around and give this major, depending upon the situation, like a major, repercussion that may shift their perspective regarding honesty, because the reward is knowing that they are integral in order to build up the integrity within them, so that they know that being honest isn't bad, and being honest shouldn't make them feel bad because of being honest. Now, I'm not going to say that there should not be a such thing as consequences, because naturally there are. Even if someone is honest about a situation, doesn't mean that they can't potentially still be fined within society, or literally go to prison within society if they're going to be honest. I know there was one clip about one guy that was in prison, and he literally decided in that moment, because he said too much, that he was like, "Blah, blah, 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 blah," and then just end up telling on himself. So of course, through his honesty, he ends up having the consequence of doing time. But at the same time, what it means is that you are building someone whom has solid character. So then hopefully through their honesty, that they also will learn the skill set of sound judgment, so that because of the fact that they know they're honest, there's certain actions they just won't do, because they won't want to have to deal with the consequences of those actions. Does that make sense? So again, parenting is a very nuanced way of being, and it's a hat. It's not just one hat; it's multiple hats through all phases and stages of life, because parenting a child, a youth, and then being a parent who has an adolescent, a parent who has older children, there's an evolution that happens through all the phases and stages. Now, my experience with regards to being a parent is solely through clinical experience, but I can say that in some ways it's not because I was told that I need to, but I was sort of a pseudo parent, because as the eldest sibling after my father passed away, I just kind of took on certain roles. And that's a completely different seminar, because I could provide a seminar specifically about grief and how it changes family roles and responsibilities and the dynamics within families, because I've experienced that extensively. But today we're going to focus on teens and parents because teens, and hear me very carefully, during adolescence and late teen years and young adulthood, they're going through a phase and a stage where they are learning what it means to be independent. If they want to know what it's like to go and spend time with their friends without their parents being around at the mall, if they want to get a car and their license and they want to drive themselves, if they want to get a job because they want to make their own money, those are all positive behaviors in order for them to gain a level of independence. And it means that they're preparing themselves for adulthood because they have a sense of knowing that the next steps is adulting. If you have an adolescent that is focusing on what they can do in order to improve themselves, what they would like to do next as far as college or career, if they are focusing on how can they enhance themselves as far as what their knowledge base is, or considering what they can do socially with their friends, and also are thinking about things like dating, all appropriate conversations and topics. And a part of the reason why it can be a very interesting stage and phase for parents because there's a lot of exploration, like I said in the beginning. And a part of the reason why 91% of adolescents and teens usually don't tell their parents why things are happening is because of how the parent responds. Not saying the parent is at fault. Majority of parents who are parents, want the best for their children and they don't want to see their child ever hurt or harmed. At the same time, some people, just like most parents have, learn through experience. Now, there is something to be said about learning from someone else's story because that is wisdom. Then, if someone learns through their own lived experience, and that's life experience and lessons learned, that can also still transform into wisdom. Okay, so with that being said, I'd like to be able to share here that there are different types of communication. Okay, now sometimes you can tell that there's something going on, whether someone says something to you or not, especially if you are observant of your child's behavior, parents. Just as much as you may watch your child or not, and I'm telling you that your adolescent also watches you, which is the reason why sometimes they don't say certain things, or they listen to conversations that have happened and they determine what they're going to share with you based on how you responded to the similar topics about other people. Perfect example, and I'm sharing this purposefully, and this is for whether you're a Christian household or not. There are adolescents that are in Christian households that I've worked with previously that have said to me, you know what? I had some questions about my sexuality and sexual orientation, but I did not have the conversation with my parents. And do you know why? Because we were watching a TV show and this particular topic popped up regarding sexuality and sexual orientation. And my mother and my father, they really berated the person. They bullied the person. They said some mean things about that person that was dealing with sexual orientation concerns or questioning, or had questions about sexuality and if they wanted to actually have sex for the first time with their boyfriend or girlfriend. And so, because of how the parent responded, the adolescent had those similar questions or concerns and refused to talk to their parents about it because of the fact that their parent, from the perspective of the adolescent and what they watch, was closed minded regarding that topic. Parents, how you respond to topics does make a difference with regard to how your adolescent will interact with you and what they will share, what he or she will share, and what he or she will not share. And that also includes topics like drugs. I pause for a second because, again, the phase and stage of what it means to explore with different recreational activities. Now, I'm not saying that drugs or alcohol have to be recreational, but what I am saying is that much of the American society has placed emphasis on adolescents in high school and college and drugs and alcohol. Now, what I will say for the teens to hear this carefully, that 65% of adolescents or young adults that are in college and high school do not drink, do not use drugs. Keep that in mind because sometimes you all think that you have to do particular things recreationally because of the peer pressure, but you don't. There's 65% of you guys that aren't and that won't. And so keep that in mind. And this is information for parents as well as adolescents to be able to be mindful of. But what I'm going to ask you to do, what I'm going to ask you to do as a way of, being able to record the temperature of your relationships, parents and adolescents, write down what is going well in your relationship between you and your parents or parents and teens. What do you wish happened more often between the parents and the teens? And what is it that is not happening currently that you would like to see happen in your relationship? And then the fourth and final question is, on a scale of 0 to 10, how connected do you feel to your parent or to your adolescent child? 10 meaning the most, awesome, close, really, really close connection. Nothing can come between us. 0 meaning there's no connection at all. Forget about it. And then you decide where you are on that scale, okay? From your perspective. And I would even like to ask you to just additionally explain why. Now, my hope is that when you all watch this video, that the parent and the teen will watch it together and also answer those particular questions together. So that means at this point in time, if you'd like to pause the video, you can answer the questions and discuss them because it's important to start off with what is going well, okay? And then from there, that's when you say what you would like to add on. What is it that isn't happening that you wish that you could add on? Now, this is something you can at least just start off with answering question 1 and then answering question 4. 2 and 3, we're going to work on through discussing communication. Communication is nonverbal and verbal, which is the reason why it's important to understand each person that you're in a relationship with, specifically between parents and teens, what they mean when they say something, because each person does language things differently. It never fails. There's always been a time where I would make say a particular statement or a phrase, and especially with all of these different, all the different jargon, what teens say today, like, it means different things. So asking and getting clarification with regards to their lingo and how they would speak to their friends versus how they would speak to you, and then even the language of the household and then also the nonverbals. Because sometimes people don't have to say anything, and you can really tell a lot about what's happening in their life just from nonverbals. What I will say with the caveat is that sometimes, depending on if a person may be neurodevelopmentally challenged or have a neurodivergent concern or challenge, being able to read expressions can be tough. So it's a matter of also knowing what your strengths as well as the growth areas are of your particular parent and or the adolescent. Because I've worked with those who are with clients who are on the spectrum, which I think again many of them extremely brilliant. At the same time, some of them differ with regards to their ability to be able to acknowledge or to be aware of facial expression. So, for example, that's a face that means sad, or that's a face that means happy, or that's a face that means surprised, or maybe it's like confused, or if someone is like pensive. Okay, so being able to read facial expressions is important with regards to connection and relationship because sometimes people will tell you more through nonverbals than they will verbally. More often than not, when I'm working with parents and adolescents, the parent will say, when we sit down for dinner and we have conversations, or after school practice, they return home and I returned home from work and they're home from school. I attempted to speak to them and their answers were 1, 2 word answers. Oh, everything is fine. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, that was awesome. So sometimes you have to start off with the nonverbals. Now, another, just a small tip. Some parents may already do this. But at the same time, what I'd like to say is that sometimes finding what their favorite activity is, and don't tell them I told you. So adolescents, don't give your parents a tough time about it. If you know that you have a particular activity that is your favorite activity, like say for example, playing a particular game or a particular sport, and they join you, sometimes they're more likely to open up and share. I'm not saying always, but sometimes, just being active and allowing their mind to be active on something else allows space and time for them first to relax because having conversations about tough topics for adolescents as well as adults and even children uh, can bring up nerves. Sometimes people just get nervous when they're having to have a tough conversation. And so implementing something that will allow them to feel more relaxed then will allow for a better conversation. Mhm. Something to think about. Now, the other part about this particular topic regarding parent and child, or parent adolescent, excuse me, parents and teens relationship is that it depends on where they are in their particular phase or stage. If these are particular practices so far from what I've shared are consistent and parents are mindful of how you respond, but then adolescent is willing to be open and honest. I must say with that caveat, honesty, which is the reason why parents and children discussing household rules is important, because household rules means that there are rules and principles and value foundationally that are going to be implemented by everyone in the household, right? So sometimes when rules are implemented, they are specific to just one person or maybe a few people, or maybe kind of like the top down method, which is a hierarchy said so that that's what we have to do. But then if the bottom up does not see the implementation from the top down, then there creates a situation. So if they are expected to keep their room clean and your room and your bathroom is a hot mess, they probably not going to hear you as well because they're thinking that you're telling them to implement something that you are in fact unwilling to implement yourself. And then they have to deal with consequences and you don't. So my recommendation is parents, if you're going to create rules, make sure they're rules that are implemented by everyone in the household. So that means even with regards to yelling. Now, I know this can be a nuanced conversation, so everyone has particular different. Is that if you ask them to be respectful with regards to your tone, you like, didn't I tell you? Now, if they didn't hear you after you speaking to them the 2 or 3 times, a raising of the voice to a certain barometer, understood, but at the same time, if it sounds aggressive, if it's angry, if there are curse words, then that is going into a realm of disrespect that expectancy from your child or your adolescent. I'm not trying to say that situations don't happen. Again, there's always grace, and then there's always opportunities to be able to implement what it means to go through phases and stages of forgiveness, repair of the relationship, reconciliation. Okay. But at the same time, what I'm saying is that a lot of times, whatever you model for your child or for your adolescent, at that point, once they're an adolescent, they've already seen that particular pattern from you of communication over and over, which is the reason why I'm saying what I'm sharing with you now, parents, is something that if you have little ones, is a great place to start with them. So then as they continue to grow up, they have a certain expectation of what they will see from their parent, because consistency with regard to communication and also rules and consequences leads to there being a sense of safety within a household, a safety within a relationship, because they know what to expect. And when they know what to expect, then they know, again, how you're going to respond when they need to really speak to you about something quite sensitive. Okay. And so that's why it's important for the consistency. Um, and it also helps your adolescent to know how to even manage their own emotions. A lot of times, people learn the best skill sets with regards to relationships through the relationships that they have, especially growing up during their rearing years. So that happens in their household. So whether it's their biological parents, foster parents, adoptive parents, or aunts and uncles and cousins, grandparents, whomever they live with, they learn a lot about relationships, communication, how to reconcile, how to work through conflict resolution through their relationships growing up. Okay. And so again, it's patterns that they learn that bring them through to adulthood, and sometimes it's through those relationships that were extremely different that teach them either better or unfortunately sometimes maladaptive patterns. And so the idea is again, doesn't mean there's such thing as perfect. And it's not a requirement. What we're saying is that as we go along, we have an understanding of each person, how they communicate, how they hear effectively, and then how to be able to resolve conflicts effectively, how to negotiate effectively, in order to make sure that they're able to continue to grow and to develop into, again, a well-rounded human being, adult, that is able to contribute effectively to their community and to society and have a positive impact in the world with regard to their mission, vision, purpose. And then even within a family, each family can have their own vision, mission, purpose, understand, and goals. And that helps them to learn what it means to establish goals, in order to implement goals, in order to be able to check off on a goal saying that they've accomplished it. And so it's a way for them to always be looking forward and working on enhancements, right? So, with consideration of relationships, again, there's the nonverbals, which is the reason why I start with nonverbals, because there are families, the majority of domestic violence cases are actually not between intimate partners, it's within families. And unfortunately, and police officers probably would be able to tell you that there are cases that they see consistently regarding either sibling upon sibling fights or aggression, or parent and children aggression. Now, intimate partner violence does occur, but it's actually not, it's a part of domestic violence, but it's separate. Domestic violence really is a matter of whomever is under your household. If two people are aggressive toward each other or more, then that's considered domestic violence. And so, unfortunately, I've had plenty of cases where I've worked with parents and children who were physically aggressive toward each other. And so I'm going to make sure that it's clearly stated that, of course, it's not okay, and that is something that cannot happen if we are going to even move forward with discussing things like communication, like reconciliation. It can't happen. Literally, aggression cannot occur in order to build a healthy relationship. Okay. Okay. So people shouldn't be putting their hands on each other. I just pause for suspense. Okay. Because it doesn't create spaces of safety. Aggression does not build places or spaces of safety. Now, if you are in a kung fu class, if you're kung fu fighting, and and there's a referee, or if there's a sensei, or if you're in a boxing ring with a coach, that's different, okay? But if you're at home and if someone says something like, "No, I don't want to take the trash out," and then that turns into a brawl, not okay, not okay. All right. So I'm speaking to parents and children who, at this particular point in phase and stage, may be discussing what it means to find new ways to connect, to rebuild a new connection. There can't be any violence, and also no bullying tactics, because psychological aggression has a long-standing effect. I would say it's the same, and in some ways, even more wounding. because a bruise on a skin, you could see when it's healed, but a bruise on a heart or a mind where it affects their psyche so much so until it affects their self-esteem and how they see themselves, that's years of therapy that I've worked with people through. The emotional and psychological trauma from bullying, it would be so shocking. And even some of the narratives that people have in their mind as adults, when I meet with them as adults in therapy regarding their self-esteem, and even some imposter syndrome, when we're able to kind of make a thread through their lives, they found that the people who were saying those particular things to them before they even started saying it to themselves was their parents. So parents, even what you say to your children into your adolescence matters. Even if they're acting as though they don't hear you, how you address them matters, because it could be the tape that actually plays over and over in their mind that can affect how they view themselves in a way that can affect their performance with regard to their skill sets and their relationships, their job, schooling, everyday life, and even the relationship they can have with themselves. So at this particular point in juncture, what I'm going to say is that relationship between a parent and a child is very important. So much so that even youth whom are adopted or a part of foster families that can have parents whom are excellent, they still want to know who their biological parents are because they feel a sense of part of themselves missing. And so knowing that one belongs and knowing where they are foundationally from is extremely important because a parent-child connection speaks to history, legacy. It speaks to understanding tradition and culture. It speaks to even understanding certain just genetically imposed ways of being and thinking. For example, there are plenty of times where I've heard, "Oh my gosh," from my mom, "You know what? That face that you just made totally just reminded me of your father." And I haven't seen my father, I don't know how many, it's been at least 30 years. He died when I was 10, and I'm 41 now. And she looks at me, sees a facial expression, and I haven't seen his face in over 30 years, but somehow a facial expression that I just made reminded her of him, which means that sometimes, literally, there are parts of us, our ways of being and doing things that connect us to our own biological kin, our family, our lineage, our ancestry. All right. And so it's something to be able to keep in mind because of the fact that some things aren't necessarily just explained through nurture. And psychology discusses nature versus nurture. And so nature has to do with biology and genetics. Nurture has to do with upbringing and experiences once one is conceived alive on earth, living life, interacting with everyday life, biopsychosocial and spiritual needs of a person. I mean, all of it connects. Ultimately, the reason why I'm saying this is because if there is someone whom is discussing the connection between their adolescent and it's tough because they are a foster parent or because they are adopted parent. Understandable, because as an adolescent goes from their late teens into young adulthood and their early 20s, again, identity is major. And so a lot of times once they are at an age or a phase where they want to know more about where they're headed, that means also a lot of times they really would like to know where they came from. And so it's not abnormal for them to desire to search for their biological family. And that could help them to make sense of their life and even help to resolve particular questions so that they're able to move forward and to think about their, okay? My hope is that you'd be open to that conversation and allowing them to know what happened in their family history if they don't already know. whether that means good, bad, or indifferent. Because I can tell you this is that as a family therapist, um, secrets, when family secrets are held, a lot of times that creates cutoffs and even um, barriers within generations. Um, Especially when families have these intergenerational pattern of holding secrets and not telling because we don't want people to know about bad stuff. Doesn't mean you have to tell the world, but what it means is that sometimes sharing that information can help the youth, the adolescent, make sense of why things are the way they are. Because in their heart of hearts, a lot of children can feel things before it is known to them. So then, if there's a sense of, for example, that there's a parent that um, not in their life. They don't know where their parent is. They never met their parent. Other parents want to share the information, never told them anything about it. And all of a sudden, then they learn the information. It's better for them to know because for them not to know means that they have to continue to have this particular question mark or sort of this psychological gap in their mind. And they're creating narratives that aren't based on facts or truth. And so we know that the way the psychology of the brain works is that when we do not have information, that we will fill in the information, whether it's true or not. So rather than someone living a life with consideration of a person based on a fantasy, it's better for them to have the reality of the situation because then that can also help them to understand some parts and aspects of who they are, personality wise, for example, or mannerisms or behaviors, or maybe just to have a sense of knowing. And then they can decide how they're going to be as a parent for the future. But a lot of times, helping people to fill in information with factual information rather than fantasy helps them to create a resolve. And the resolve can lead to there being less angst. Um, a sense of resolve can lead to an opportunity for forgiveness in order for them to psychologically and emotionally move forward from the situation and to truly heal. It can reduce some feelings of stress or even trauma responses. It's helpful for them to be able to fill in the gaps in order to reduce maybe even some feelings of depression because at particular points of the year they may feel certain ways because of remembering being removed from their household. And according to meta frameworks, those are part of sequences, and we can have certain emotional responses based on annual or anniversary sessions. And so it's something to keep in mind because within relationships, um, there are patterns, and patterns can lead to solidification of particular interactions that lead to particular triggers of whether a trigger is for a positive emotion or a negative emotion. A lot of times when we discuss triggers, we're speaking about it from a negative standpoint, but also it can trigger someone to be happy. Like, say, for example, if you know that your parent really likes surprises, so that means you're going to have a throw a surprise birthday party for them, and that triggers happiness and excitement and joy for everyone because that's a way of you showing that you love them and that you care for them and that you're truly connected and that you're also heard them. And so this particular scenario leads to communication. Communication is very nuanced. We've already discussed nonverbal, but let's discuss communication from the standpoint of what is considered healthy and what is considered unhealthy, especially as you start going into the nuances of adolescence. And again, adolescents are really in a phase or a stage where they're starting to really learn and understand more high level relationship skills. So it's important for them to understand how to effectively communicate. And even when they feel certain ways, it doesn't mean that they have to communicate exactly how they're feeling it, but rather to communicate their feelings effectively and their thoughts effectively. And so there are forms of communication that can lead to win-wins for everyone, and then forms of communication that can be wins losses or loss losses. It depends on the forms of communication. But the most effective form of communication is assertive communication. And now, assertive doesn't necessarily mean that one has to have a loud voice. Meaning, I know I have a natural booming voice because this is my chest voice, and when I speak, it's actually quite deep. At the same time, there are people that speak very softly, and they can be just as assertive and communicate their thoughts and their feelings and desires. and that's okay. Or have a high pitched voice, it depends on whatever your voice is. Utilize your voice, find your voice. But I always tell people to start off with just put your hand on your chest and then just speak. And if you can feel your chest vibrating, that is your natural chest voice. And to speak assertively means to be very clear about what your message is and to say it in a way that honors what you are experiencing and also honors and does not disrespect the person whom you are speaking to. So, for example, if you feel as though, something was done incorrectly to you or unjustly, for you to say, bump you, I don't give a rip, and just to go off, no, no, that's not assertive. That's aggressive communication. If you telling them what you think about them and how you can't stand them, and then you start telling them all the stories about everything that they did wrong in the past, and you cussing them out and you calling them all sorts of stupid and dumbs, that's aggressive communication. That's not assertive. There is a difference. Aggressive communication, again, just like I've said before, can have the effect like abuse can, like trauma, anxiety, depression, self-esteem, because it's a matter of the person who's communicating trying to win and trying to make the other person look bad, which means that they have to lose. And that's not a form of communication that leads to a beneficial relationship. The idea is that through communication, that you want to make sure you are heard and then the other person is heard, and that each of you all have something that you shared that you can walk away with and implement, which means that it's a win-win situation. And that happens during assertive communication. Now, another form of communication that does not lead to a win-win for everyone is passive aggressive communication. All the time, like, oh, okay, it's okay. Do what you want to do anyway, because you're gonna do what you want to do anyway. Really though? Passive aggressive communication. Now, sometimes sarcasm can be sassy, and not every family has their own way of communicating. But if it kind of lightens things up, meaning just to break the ice and then return to a assertive communication, understood. It's a matter of knowing each person's personality. I'm not telling people to become robots and for everyone to communicate the same exact way. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if communication is always passive aggressive, then it never leads to clarification of what the concern was from the beginning, because a person is not going to communicate clearly what actually made them upset in the first place. You're just like, I don't know what I did. They mad at me. They won't talk. Every time they do talk, why don't you just blah blah blah? Really, really though? I don't even know why you're upset. Can you tell me why you're upset? You know what you did. No, I don't. It's like those clips from Key and Peele. Key and Peele cracked me. You know what you did though. No, I really don't know what I did. But if you would like to tell me what I did, then I can do a better job next time. Okay. And so in passive aggressive communication, it's a loss for everyone because the person whom is upset is communicating something, or maybe even if they're not upset, but they just don't know how to say, this is what I need, or like, this is what I want from you. They feel as though if they do speak up, that and they are assertive regarding the communication, that potentially maybe they'll be rejected, or maybe they don't know how the other person is going to respond. Which is the reason why I said from the beginning that communication within a safe relationship is important, because then to attempt to have assertive communication within a relationship that does not feel safe will can sometimes cause more harm than good. So make sure that you feel safe. Make sure that you feel a certain level of connectedness. I would say at least have five and up. I mean, really. With regards to your connectivity. Um, so I mentioned assertive, I mentioned aggressive, passive aggressive communication. And then there's passive, where it's just like they won't ever talk about it. Something could be bothering them forever, but they just won't bring it up. And again, that's a loss. Passive aggressive is actually like a loss win, meaning like it won't create situations. Passive aggressive communication, aggressive communication, just are forms of communication that usually does not lead to clear understanding of what's happening, as far as a concern, clear understanding of how each person felt. And let me make sure I pause with this caveat. When someone tells you how they feel, it's best to not share an opinion with regards to their feeling. Why? Feelings are subjective. Each person feels what they feel. The only time I would say that you would say anything regarding a feeling is just to acknowledge their feeling. I would like to acknowledge in this moment that you felt nervous, and I can see how you would feel that way. Validate, but don't ever say, "No, no, you don't feel that way," or that's how you felt. No, to tell someone what they feel, or to tell someone that they don't feel a certain way, is telling them that they're not allowed to have a human experience, and that is not a great way to effectively have a connection with the relationship. And the reason why I'm mentioning this between parents and teens is because it's important during these phases and stages between parents and children to learn that, because the same communication that I'm telling you all about is the same type of communication that happens even in intimate relationships. So if your adolescent is going to grow up and is dating or ends up being married, or, it's important for them to learn how to effectively communicate. So when they are in a long-term relationship or when they're married, that they are not being passive or are telling their partner how to feel or not feel, not validating their feelings, not speaking of their feelings in a validating way, or telling them that they shouldn't feel that way, because that really can create concerns relationally, connectedness wise, their ability to understand their emotions and also to feel connected internally, interconnected, internally and intraconnected, uh, inter intraconnected internally and also interconnected between them and their partner. Okay. So a lot of what I'm sharing with you now is just, skill sets that are positively effective within relationships. So it's important to understand that caveat that feelings are a person's own human experience. The fact that they are verbalizing it to you, you should see it as a way of them allowing themselves to be vulnerable enough to connect with you. And if they're allowing themselves to be vulnerable enough to connect with you, that means that they want to be in a relationship with you. They want to connect. And so that actually is an open door for a great conversation when they share their feelings. It's not an open door for an argument. It's not an open door for you to tell them what they did wrong. Rather, you know what? I didn't know that. Well, what happened? Tell me what led to that. Wow, thank you for sharing that. I hear you. Now, how can we have done something differently next time? And that's a completely different conversation than saying, well, you know what? I know why they upset because no, or excuse me, no, no, because how many times have I spoken to you? Because speaking to you requires me to be that way for you to even hear, so it's a matter of knowing and learning the art of connecting with your adolescent and vice versa. As adolescents, you all know the difference between right and wrong, and you know how to connect with your parents. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't know how to deal with the consequences of what you dealt with, and then to have a particular conversation in order to be able to still go over your friend's house and to have a good time, right? So because of that, use that skill set to genuinely build a great relationship, continue a relationship with your parents. You know why? Because building a positive relationship with your parent lasts through the years. As sure as I am sitting here now recording this video, there is going to be a time when what your parents told you or taught you will ring in your mind as not just an adolescent, but a young adult and an adult. It'll make more sense as you get older. It will make more sense as you get older, because as you go through particular life experiences, then you'll understand why your parents provided certain wisdom or solutions. Sometimes certain information doesn't make sense at the time because it doesn't have contextual foundation to it yet. Once you go through particular situations or scenarios in your life, then you'll see why parents are good people, wise people. Now, uh, we've gone through different forms of communication. You talked about the difference between verbal and nonverbal. What I'm going to ask you all to do, just for the sake of time for today, and I'll probably continue. Um, and if you all think of particular topics you would like for me to discuss at a later time, then please just, send me an email or place a message on the YouTube post, okay? So my email is neclmft@gmail.com. Or you can just leave a message or leave a comment on the on YouTube. Or if it's on my app, then just leave me a message on the Dr. C community app, okay? Um, because I'd like for you all to answer the questions that you answered in the beginning at the end again. First, that's through implementation, okay? So I'm going to ask you all to consider one of the topics of what you would like to see happen more of. And then also, I'd like for you to discuss a topic about what you wish could happen within your parent-child relationship or parent-adolescent, parent-teen relationship. Discuss it utilizing assertive communication, okay? And then I'm going to ask you all to write down what is it that you're going to work on. Now, I'm not saying share it with each other unless you would like to. List at least 3 things that you know that you are going to work on that has been discussed during this recording. And at the end of the day, I certainly hope that you all benefit from this video and that you continue to work on your relationships. Because just like it says with Dr. C in Life Lessons, who you are as a person matters more than what you do. Now, it doesn't mean that what you do doesn't have an effect, but at the foundation, when you are living a life, certain skill sets with certain understandings, mindsets that have to do with your values and your principles, then your mindset affects how you move, what you do, and what you don't do. Okay? So I'm always saying what you do. I didn't go into any nuances of who. I said what. Okay? Now, because that's going to be another discussion on another day. And I hope that you all have a great